Good morning, students. So this is going to be your lecture 4, chapter number 2, Forest and Wildlife Resources. The summary that we are going to cover in this chapter, class 10th, subject geography. So basically in this particular lecture, what we are going to study is that we are going to summarize the entire chapter. We will discuss all the topics again and all the main points of those topics. What we have covered in this chapter, so that basically it can be a rewind for you that we have done in these previous lectures from this chapter. So we will study about forest and wildlife resources as an entire chapter now. First of all, I will give you a quick introduction about the chapter. This chapter is all about biodiversity, the variety of plants and animal life in the world or in the particular habitat, a very high level of which is usually considered to be important and desirable, that is known as biodiversity. So all the plants and animals that have life and they are in this living in this particular world, and they are part of this ecological system which we are only a part and very much dependent on this system only for our existence, that is biodiversity. And here when we talk about biodiversity, forest plays a very key role in the ecological system. How? Because forest is the primary producer on which all living beings are dependent on. So forest is one of the most important key partner when we talk about the biodiversity. How? Because it is the primary producer on which these living beings are dependent on. All the resources that we get from that we are eating or whatever it is, all the stuff that we are wearing, that comes from these forests only. So forest plays a very key role here. Then when we describe biodiversity, so biodiversity is the variety of different types of life found on earth, and it is measure of the variety of organisms present in different ecosystems, which can be referred as the genetic variations that are present in a particular area, basically a group of family that is present in an area. Then ecosystem variation, there is a lot of life available on earth, different forms of life, different forms of species are there, so that is ecosystem variation. And species variation within an area, basically one form of life that is there in a particular area, that is the species variation. So that is biodiversity. Now when we talk biodiversity or biological diversity, it is quite immensely rich in wildlife and cultivated species, which is diverse in form and function but closely integrated in the system through multiple network of interdependence. So basically this biodiversity depend on each other, as the humans are dependent on these natural resources that are present in our environment, and they are dependent on us because we will be the one who are giving them the life supporting things. So basically it's a kind of an integrated system through multiple network of interdependence. So they are dependent on us and we are dependent on them. So that's what biodiversity is all about. Now we talk about flora and fauna in India. So basically flora is the plant family in India and the fauna is the animal family that are present in India. So flora are the plants and the fauna are the animals and other species that are there in India that we are going to talk about in this chapter. So India is one of the world's richest countries in terms of its vast array of biological diversity and has nearly 8% of the total number of species in the world, and 90,000 species of fauna and 74,000 species of flora. So basically there are 90,000 species. 90,000 species of fauna means the animal families, and 74,000 species of flora means the plant family that are there in India. And 15,000 flower plants are also there. Basically flowering plants are different from these flora because they don't grow in the forest area. So flowering plants like rose, marigold and all these things, they are different from these flora family. They are different from these flora that are available in India. So these are the 15,000 flowering plants and 2,000 species of birds are also there. So when we count about the species of fauna, birds we can't count them in this fauna family. So birds are also excluded from fauna. They are in a different category. So we are counting 15,000 flowering plants and 2,000 species of birds. And these 10% of flora and 20% of mammals are on threatened list. Why these threatened lists? Is because they are kind of in a verge of extinction because of the excessive use that we are using them, and because the and we talk about when the forest cover is 78.29 million hectare, which is 23.81% of the total geographical area that they have covered. Now some estimates suggest that at least 10% of India's recorded wild flora and 20% of its mammals are on threatened list that we have just talked about. Why? Because many of these would not be categorized as critical because they are in the verge of extinction, like the cheetah. Basically the animals like cheetah, pink-headed duck, mountain quail, forest spotted owlet, and plants like madhukua, they are the ones that are in the verge of extinction, or many are extincted also. So in fact no one can say that how many species have already been lost. So we can't even say how many number of species we have already lost also. They are n numbers. So and multiple of species are on the verge of extinction. So that's a kind of a status in all over world about these particular species that are there on earth. Now there are 6 different species that are recognized by IUCN. They are the normal species, endangered species, vulnerable species, rare species, endemic species, and the extensive species. So these are the 6 categories that are divided into these 6 different species. The first one is the normal species. The second one is the endangered species. The first normal species say that these species, those who are population level, are considered to be normal and they can survive, such as cattle, alpine. So they are the normal species. Now then the endangered species, these are the species which are in danger of extinction, and the survival of such species is difficult if the negative factors that have led to a decline in their population continue to operate, like the black buck, crocodile, Indian wild ass. These are the examples of the endangered species. Then vulnerable species are basically the population has declined to the levels from where it is likely to move into the endangered category in the near future if the negative factors continue to operate. Basically negative factors are all these poaching and the hunting activities that happen in these forests. So because of that, and basically the use that we are taking from these animals by taking out their skins and their material from them. So these are the kind of negative factors that if they continue to operate, so there will always be a decline of these kind of animals also, especially these blue sheep, Asiatic elephant and dolphins, etc. Then rare species with small population may move into the endangered or vulnerable category if the negative factors affecting them continue to operate. For example, these Himalayan brown bear, wild Asiatic buffalo, desert fox, and hornbill. So if these negative factors continue to affect these things, so many of the species, they are in the verge of to come from this vulnerable category to this rare species. Then there is endemic species. Endemic species say that they are only found in some particular areas, usually isolated by natural or geographical barriers. For example, these Andaman tail and Nicobar pigeon and Andaman wild pig. So they are particularly found in particularly areas, not you can find them in every places. So they are found in particular areas. So that's why they are endemic species. Now they are extinct species. Basically there are many species which are not found after searches of known or likely areas also. So these species are extinct from a local area, region or country or a continent from the entire earth. So these are these aesthetic cheetah, pink-head duck. So these are few of these animals that are not even found right now also. Now we will talk about these aesthetic cheetah. Where did they go? So aesthetic cheetah, how did they vanish from this entire earth. So they were the world's fastest land mammal. They were the world's largest land mammal. The cheetah is a unique and specialist member of the cat family, and they can move to the speed of 112 kilometer per hour. So they can move on a speed of 112 kilometer per hour. And this cheetah is often mistaken for a leopard. When we talk about cheetah, it is not a leopard. It is highly mistaken as a leopard. It is distinguishing marks are there on his body when we can identify who is a cheetah and who is a leopard. The long teardrop shaped lines on each side of the nose from the corner of his eyes to its mouth. And prior to in the 20th century, cheetahs were widely disturbed throughout Africa and Asia. Today, the Asian cheetah is nearly extinct due to a decline of available habitat and prey, and the species was declared extinct in India long back in 1952. So in 1952, long back in India, they have declared that this Asian cheetah is no more there in the entire earth. So you can see in the picture how does this Asian cheetah look like. So he has such strong vibe that you can see from his face and his entire body. That is quite rare to find anywhere in this world after 1952. Now, what are the negative factors that can cause such fearful depletion of the flora and fauna? So we have transformed nature into a resource obtaining directly and indirectly from the forest and wildlife. So basically, for taking these resources that we are continue to have it. So they are transforming these natural resources, these forest resources into resources, and obtaining directly or indirectly from the forest and wildlife only. And the greatest damage inflicted on Indian forest was during this colonial period. So basically it started from this colonial period when they have found that they have damaged most of these Indian forests. Even after the independence also, agricultural expansion continues to be one of the major cause of this depletion of forest. And according to the Forest Survey of India, over 26,200 square kilometer forest area was converted into agricultural land. So basically when we talk about the survey that has been happening in India, 26,200 square kilometer forest area was converted into this agricultural land at that point of time. And substantial parts of these tribal belts have been deforested or degraded by shifting cultivation. Jhum, which is a type of slash and burn agriculture, was also being managed. Now, are these colonial forest policies to be blamed? When these colonial policies have been framed, can we blame them for this vanishing of these forest and wildlife resources? So how? Basically, these colonial forestry caused irreparable environmental damage because the livelihood of these communities who subsisted on forest and became the role model of India's post-independence forest management, thus ensuring its insidious continuity. And the expansion of these railway reduced teak and sal forests of Peninsular India to such an extent that the Deodar forests of North India were required to be tapped, and trees which were commercially profitable were replaced by other species. This is known as the enrichment plantation. So basically in this you can see that the policies have vanished the major profitable forest trees from the area. So basically what they were doing, that all the forest area, all the trees that are giving them profitable amount in the and so they were building a forest community where they can get commercially profitable society and not just a natural world for the environment. They were just taking all the beneficial things from this environment so that they can get money out of it. So these basically these trees like teak and sal, from where these medicines also come, so they are commercially profitable for them, and they call them this enrichment plantation that time. The Himalayan yew in trouble. So there was, and the Himalayan yew was a medicinal plant that was there. It is found in Himachal Pradesh and Arunachal Pradesh. From the parts of these bark, needles, and twigs are and roots of this tree, a chemical component called Taxol is extracted also. And this Himalayan yew is a species of the yew tree that grows in the temperate regions of this world, and the name is most prominently given to any of these various coniferous trees and shrubs in the genus Talcus. So basically, Himalayan yew was a medicinal plant from the barks and needles of that tree they get this medicine Taxol, which is helpful for fight these cancer, and the bark part was used for the remedy of these respiratory illness in the Uniting medicine. So they are taking these parts of this tree for making medicine, and the rest of the part of the tree is just useless for them. So they take it as they don't take any other part of that. So they are taking the major part of the tree, and when they take all these major parts, all the trees are extracted. They cannot be used anymore. So they were in such a position. So now, because of these things, often these butter trees produced from these bark of the tree, people of the Himalayan belt believe that these god and goddess have their adored in this tree, and the species is under great threat due to this over exploitation of medicines that they are taking from it. And in the last decade, thousands of these yew trees have dried up in various parts of Himachal Pradesh and Arunachal Pradesh. So basically, more than half of these trees that are there in Himachal Pradesh and Arunachal Pradesh have dried up. They are not at all in use, and they are quite vanished basically. So you can see the image of this Himalayan yew tree. So how they look like, from where they take this medicine. Basically the red part is the way from where they get this medicine from, and its roots also they take it that. Now, conservation of forest and wildlife in India. So conservation is the background of rapid decline in wildlife population, and forestry has become essential. Why? Because of this conservation, all these wildlife and forests became safe from many of these poachers and hunters that were happening on Earth, and they were considered as considered as the most important thing that should happen for these forests and wildlife in India. The conservation policy was very essential at that point of time, and this conservation preserves the ecological diversity and our life support systems also. So if there will be these forest and wildlife resources available on Earth, our life will also can be easily survivable here. And this Indian Wildlife Act was implemented in 1972, and all India list of protected species were also established, and the reason of this program was towards protecting the remaining population of certain endangered species. Central and state government established these national park and wildlife sanctuaries. It also announced that these several projects for protecting specific animals which were gravely threatened. Many animals have been fully or partially legal protection against hunting and trade throughout India. Now there was this main project, that was this Project Tiger. Tiger is one of the key wild species in the Faneuil web. Basically, in the Faneuil web is one of the key wildlife species, and in 1973 the authorities realized that the tiger population has vanished to 1827 from an estimated 55,000 at the turn of the century, and the major threats to tiger population are numerous, such as these poaching for trade, shrinking habitat, depletion of prey, base species, and growing human population, etc. So these were the reasons, and the trade of these tiger skins and the use of their bones in traditional medicine, especially in the Asian countries, left the tiger population on the verge of extinction. Since India and Nepal provide habitat to about 2/3 of the surviving tiger population in the world, these two nations become prime targets for poaching and illegal trading. And this Project Tiger was launched, one of the well-published wildlife campaigns in the world, because it was launched in 1973. Initially, it showed success as the tiger population went up to 4,002 in 1985 and 4,334 in 1989. But in 1993, the population of tiger has dropped to 36,000. There were only 39 tiger reserves in India, covering an area of 32,134.14 square kilometers at that point of time. Tiger conservation has been viewed not only as an effort to save an endangered species, but with an equal importance as a mean of preserving biotypes of sizable magnitude also. And this Corbett National Park in Uttarakhand, Sundarbans National Park in West Bengal, then Bhangrav National Park in Madhya Pradesh, Sariska Wildlife Sanctuaries in Rajasthan, Manas Tiger Reserve in Assam, they are all these national sanctuaries and national parks that were built. Some of these are for the Tiger Reserve of India. And these conservation projects are now focusing on this biodiversity rather than on a few of its components. There is now a more intensive search for different conservation measures also. Here, as you can see in the record, so basically they are different types of forest and wildlife resources also. For now, there are so many acts, so many things that are available to conserve these forest and wildlife resources. So what could be that basically the types of the forest and wildlife resources that are there? So in our country, the majority of forest and wildlife resources are categorized into three forests. First is this reserved, second is protected, and the third is unclassed forest. So these are the three types of forest. So in reserved forest, more than half of the total forest land has been declared reserved forest. Reserved forests are regarded as the most valuable as far as the conservation of these forest and wildlife resources are concerned. And in protected forest, almost 1/3 of the total forest area is protected forest as declared by the Forest Department. And this forest land are protected from any further depletion. Then third is this unclassed forest. These are other forests and wasteland belonging to both government and private individuals and these communities. So these are the three forests that are there in the distribution of forest and wildlife resources. Now there was one new trend that was happened in this conservation policy. The first one is this increase in biodiversity. How you can increase biodiversity? So there was a policy that has been made. So it says that the conservation projects are now focusing on the biodiversity rather than on the few of its components, and there is now a more intensive search for different conservation measures, and it is increasingly now saving. Even insects are beginning to find a place in conservation planning. In the notification under Wildlife Act of 1980 and 1986, there were several hundred butterflies, moths, beetles, and one of the dragonflies have been added to the list of protected species. In 1991, for the first time, these plants were also added to the list and started with these 6 species. So after they have declared this, that there are other species also that need to be saved, like these butterflies, these moths, these beetles, and one of the dragonflies also. So they have been added to this list of protected species in 1991. For the first time, the plants were also added to the list, starting with these 6 species that I have taught you before. And another topic that is this community and conservation. In some of the areas in India, local communities are struggling to conserve these habitats along with these government officials that are present at that time. Like in Sariska Tiger Reserve, Rajasthan, villagers have found against mining by citing the Wildlife Protection Act. So basically, few of their local regions, they have established their own kind of protection act there. beside of these Wildlife Protection Act, so that these villagers are protecting their habitats by rejecting these governmental involvement in their particular areas. So they have declared these inhabitants of these 5 villages in the Alwar district of Rajasthan have declared 1200 acres of forest as the Bhairodev, Dakar, Sonsuri, declaring their own set of rules and regulations which do not allow hunting, and they are protecting the wildlife against any outside encroachments. So basically they want their land to be protected at any cost, so they are basically involving their own people in this to safeguard these things. So they have declared these 1200 acres of forest land as a place where they haven't allowed any sort of hunting or any sort of act to be implemented there. They are saving their land on their own. And basically there are some other natural worship areas also, like these trees are many of these trees are now called as sacred groves, basically these forests of god and goddesses. So these natural worship is an age-old tribal belief based on these premises that all creations of this nature have to be protected, and such belief have preserved several virgin forests in these pristine form called sacred groves, which is the forest of god and goddess. And these patches of forest and parts of these large forests have been left untouched by these local people, and any interference with them is banned. So basically there are many trees that are there in India that are treated as to be blessed, and they are a part of these god and goddesses. So they are illegally they are banned. You can't touch them, you can't do anything with these trees, you have to worship these trees. So there are some pre-logics that are there from very long time back, and still now they are following the same rituals that are there for these kind of trees. Like basically the Mundas and the Santhal of Chota Nagpur region worship these Mawa and the Kandamba trees, and the tribals of Odisha and Bihar worship the tamarind and these mango trees during these weddings. And many of us worship people and banyan trees as considered as sacred. So basically there are many regions in India, they worship these kind of trees, and they don't want any sort of interference of any of these government agents or any sort of legally accompanied policies. They just want these trees to be worshipped because of these norms that they are following from ages. And these Indian societies comprises several cultures also, and each with its own set of traditional methods of conserving nature and its creation. These sacred qualities are often aspired to be springs, mountain peaks, plants and animals which are closely protected. So basically in the regions where these temples are there, and all the plants and animals that are all around them, they are to also not to be taken away from anywhere. They are also a part of it. Like basically when you go to these temple areas in like Vaishno Devi and other places also, in Rajasthan is also there, one Vishnoi village is also there. So you can see there are langurs, monkeys are there around them. So they are fed daily and they are treated as a part of these temple devotees. So they treat them as normal human beings, they treat them as their temple devotees. And in other around this Vishnoi village in Rajasthan, there are herds of blackbuck, nilgai and peacocks, and can be seen as an integral part of the community, and nobody can harm them. So they are a part of it. You can't touch them, you can't harm them in any way. They are part of these temple areas. So basically the last one was this Chipko movement in these Himalayas, which has not only successfully resisted deforestation from that particular area, but has also shown that community afforestation with indigenous species can be enormously successful. How? Because these farmers and citizens that are there, they have transformed the act like Beach Bachao Andolan in Tehri and Navdanya have shown that educate levels of diversified crop production without the use of scientific chemicals are possible and economically viable. In India, Joint Forest Management Program furnishes a good example for involving these local communities in the management and these restoration of degraded forests. The program has been in formal existence since 1988 when the state of Odisha passed the first resolution for joint forest management. These JFM depends on the formation of these local institutions that undertake protection activities mostly on these degraded forest land managed by these forest department. In return, these members of these communities are entitled to get these benefits like non-timber forest produces and share in the timber harvest by successful protection. And the clear lesson that they get from these things is the dynamics of both environmental destruction and reconstruction in India is that local communities everywhere have to be involved in some kind of natural resource management, and but there is still a long way to go before local communities are at the central stage in decision making. So they are still not a part of the decision making community except those economic and developmental activities. They are the people centric and environmental friendly and economically rewarding. So this was the entire chapter that we have discussed right now, all the main topics, and we have discussed these main topics also. Now the homework for today will be that you have to read the entire chapter again. You have to read the entire chapter again, and if you have any doubts you can ask in the comment section, and you have to solve these NCERT question number 5, all the parts. So there are 2 parts that you have to solve there, and it is there on the website also. You can get the answer from the website after a day period. So please focus on your studies, study hard, stay healthy and stay at your home. Thank you so much.